the third, maybe half the way down.
Right.
Not a third of the way down. There's a pasuk in Kohelet. So the discussion today, which is a very challenging, I wouldn't say challenging, it's an easy daf, but it's a very difficult to understand daf, is all about an encounter, one encounter, the whole daf today, between Shlomo HaMelech and Ashmedai. Ashmedai, which I guess his name sort of sounds, was a shade, right? He was the king of the shadim. I don't know what shadim are exactly. But we'll see. It's interesting because you'll see a little bit in the story with Shlomo that in some ways it's like Shlomo's, I would say, alter ego or Shlomo's, other what we're going to see. And it's a very interesting thing because the shade Ashmedai is constantly quoting Shlomo, right? He constantly quotes Kohelet and Shir Hashirim, and we'll see. So very fascinating. Obviously, we bring it because our Mishnah yesterday, which is long in the past, talked about a person who was, mentally unstable and was possessed by a shade, right? So that was some of the medical terminology, or maybe not medical, but metaphysical terminology that they utilize. So that's why we bring it, but of course, nothing else to really do with Gittin in this daf. So we are, right, so you said a third of the way down, it's a pasuk from Kohelet. It says, Asita li sharim, I think it's the shin, visharot. Yeah, you made for me those who sing, male and female, or music, tanugot b'nei adam, all the pleasure of people, and sheda v'shedot. So what does that mean, right? So sharim v'sharot elamine zemer, that refers to people singing or instruments. I'm not sure why male and female, maybe it's men and women singing, or male and female instruments. Tanugot b'nei adam, that's referring to things that are enjoyable, like elo brechot, merchatzot, right? The bathhouses and swimming pools and spas. But what are sheda v'shedot, right? What does that mean? So hacha here, meaning here in Bavel, tergimu shida v'shidatan. It refers to male and female shedim, right? So it's a shade zachar and a shade nikeva. So Shlomo HaMelech is saying that I had all these magical creatures around me. Mimarava, which I guess they were a little more literal, Amri Shedata. It's referring to a carriage, Rashi says, I think here somewhere.
Yeah.
That it's basically like a box. Sheda means a box usually, but it means some kind of thing that you would carry a person in, some kind of fancy, new car or something. So it means much more literal. But in Bavel, they referred to actual spirits, or if you call Sheda spirit. So it says
that's very different.
Yes, it is very different. But I mean, you could obviously see the parallel in some way that you utilize the shade. We're going to see in a second. Shlomo utilizes the shade to do work for him, essentially, which is the equivalent of using your carriage in some ways. But we'll see. So ask the Gemara the Mai boy, so why in the world did Shlomo need to, if Shlomo was Kohelet, right? Did Shlomo need to make these shadim or gather these shadim to do work for him? Dichtiv. It's because of the following challenge. It says, right? It says in Melachim that when Shlomo HaMelech built the Beit HaMikdash, Even Shlema Masanivna, he built it with stones that were shalem, meaning they were not worked with iron, right? And the Torah doesn't say that you can't work anything with iron. It says you can't use that for the Mizbeach, right? The stones in the Mizbeach can't be used with Kli Barzel. But Shlomo apparently expanded that to the whole Beit HaMikdash, which is very challenging to build a house when you can't cut anything, right? So, Amrul Rabbanan, so he said to his scholars, his sages, hey, chiyavit. So I want to be strict, but how in the world can I build something without the ability to cut down stones? So Amrullah, they said, well, we have this idea, Ika Shamira. There's this thing called the Shamir. I don't know how anyone would ever translate that, but there's something called the Shamir, which is a creature, an organic thing. So it's not, using metal to cut stone, but it's some kind of organic thing. A worm is how we usually translate it, right? But I'm not sure that word fits.
They don't translate it. They keep it as Shem.
No, Rashi just says it's a birya, it's a creation, right? A creature. So anyways, there's a shamir. The Aiti Moshe La'avnei Ephod that Moshe actually used. So this shamir was created during creation, so it's one of the original foundational creatures, And Moshe found it and used it when he made the stones for the ephod, because the stones that they made for the ephod had to have written on them the names of the shvatim, and Moshe didn't write it with a pen or with etching. He used this animal or this thing to write the names on the ephod. Remember, there's a big debate about what names he wrote and which part of the names. Well, whatever he wrote, he did it with the shamir. So Shlomo said, okay, that's great. I got a historical reference, but how do I find it? I'm like, right? How in the world does one find the shamir? So relates to the rabbis or the sages explained to him, what you got to do is you got to bring a male and female shade, and kavshinu hadadi, you crush them together. I don't know what that means. And then they'll, that they find that very uncomfortable. Maybe they don't like human contact. It's not human, but maybe they don't like, physical contact. Anyways, where am I? Efshar de yadi, maybe they know the secret. And if you make them uncomfortable, you torture them, they'll explain it to you. They'll reveal it to you. So Aiti Sheda v'Shedatan. So somehow Shlomo found access to a shade and a sheda, and that's the pasuk, right? That he had all these things. And Kavshinu Adadi, he crushed them together, and he said, I want you to tell me where the Shamir is. Amri, they said, Anan lo yadina. We don't have access to those kind of secrets. But Dilma, Ashmadai Malka de Sheda Yada. If you go to Ashmadai, the king of the Shedim, he's got all the knowledge of all the Shedim. Maybe he knows. So Amalei said to them, okay, well, Hecha Ita. Well, how do you find this guy? What's his address? Right? I don't think he makes himself that available. So Amalei, they said, well, Ita Betura Plan. He's on some tours a mountain, right? On some this mountain. I don't know what Plan. Plan literally means Ploni, Rashi says, right? He's on some mountain.
Such and such a mountain.
There you go. But Rashi used the word plan as ploni, but whatever. I'm sure there's many, of course, midrashim and whatever you just showed here. But karyele bira. Now, the thing about Ashmadai is he's got his own sort of nutrition source, whatever that means again for a shade. And he dug out a bira. A bira is a bor, right? A well. Umalya maya, and he filled it up with water. Umichsaya betinra. He covered it up with tinra, which Rashi thinks is some kind of metal, right? Evan, stone, covered with a huge stone. The chatme bigushbanka, and he closed it with his seal, meaning it's locked, right? So he doesn't want anyone accessing this water source, which is somehow, life sustaining for him. The cholyuma, which we're obviously going to see, it becomes his Achilles heel, right? The cholyuma salithurakia. Every day, Ashmadai goes up to the heavens and he hangs out there. And then he comes down, then he goes down to the earth, so, he's I don't know, he's going traveling the rounds. And then he comes back to his mountain, he finds his seal, and if everything's intact, he uncovers the bar, v'shati, and he drinks his water, then he covers it again, and he seals it again. So somehow in this, seal in this water, that's like what he's very sensitive to. If you can mess up with his water, then maybe you can get to Ashmadai. Okay. So now, of course, he has a seal. He's very sensitive to that. So what do you do? So Shlomo HaMelech decided he's going to send his best guy, Benayo ben Yehoyada. The Torah says Benayo ben Yehoyada was on his army, right? He was in the tzava. So he chose Benayo ben Yehoyada was his secret service or whatever the equivalent. And he said, I want you to go and track down Ashmadai. Okay, so Shlomo HaMelech was, where are we up to? Oh, yeah. Shadre leBenayo ben Yehoyada. He sent Benayo ben Yehoyada, Yovle Shushilta dechakik Hashem. He gave him a shushilta, a rope, right, like a chain, that was written God's name on it, which seems pretty heretical, but anyways. And he gave him azkata, and he gave him an azkata, which I think is a ring. What does Rashi say? Yeah. And a ring, I'm not exactly sure where the word comes from, but he gave him a ring that also had Hashem's name, and one was to capture the shade, and one was for personal protection, right? So he gave him azkata dechakik al Hashem, ugvavi de amra v'zika de chamra, and he furthermore, where am I? Yeah, so he gave him a piece of amra, which is wool, right? Again, we'll see why he needs all these things, but he gave him like a thing of wool, a stopper, which we're going to see, and he gave him a bunch of wine. Okay, zika de chamra,
wine,
a flask, right? Zika is a thing of wine.
It says skins.
Oh, you're correct. So that's what they actually, right. They remember they used to keep their wine in skins. They had these like balloon kind of skins that the Romans used at least. So he gave him a container of wine. So anyways, this has been Ayob Yoda walking down the road, right, with his four items. Azal Kara Bira Mitatai. What Benayo did was he went and he found this mountain. He found this place. He couldn't, of course, tamper with the lock because that would have given away his whole game. So he dug down, further down, I guess, in the mountain or lower down, and he made a connection between the pit, the bar, and his hole. So he made a lower hole, and obviously it would all run out, right? So what he did was Kara Beira Mitatai, he dug a well below Ashmedai's well, and he basically emptied out the water. And then then he sealed it up with his stopper, with his wool, right? That was what he brought the wool for, to plug up the hole. And then Kra Beira Meilai, now then he dug a well that was higher up in the water table in the mountain, not the water table, in the mountain, than Ashmedai's well. And he poured the wine into that. And I guess it went into the well, right? So the wine went into Ashmedai's well. So he basically emptied it out from water. He filled it up with wine. Again, I don't know how big this well was. And he never touched the seal, right? Because he never actually went into the well. He just went above and below it. And so he put that in. And then, where am I? Vitaminu, he hid, right? He plugged it up, sorry. Visalik yativ bilani. Then he went and he climbed up and waited in a tree. So Benayo ben Yad is waiting in the tree. He ata sire the gushpanka. So Ashmedai shows back up in the afternoon or whatever. He looks at his gushpanka, at his seal, and he says, okay, everything looks good. So Galye, so he reveals his well, Ashkech Hamra, and he sees that it's full of wine. Now, this didn't bother him because he's a pretty magical creature. So I don't know, water turns into wine, and this is my thing of the day. But Ashmedai was pretty smart, and also he happened to know a lot of psukim. And it says, wait, Amar, he said, it says, late sayayin homes shechar, right? Wine makes you a joker, right? Anyone who sits, who gauges in wine is never going to become smart. And then he also happened to know Hosea, I guess, which wasn't born for many hundreds of years. Znut v'yayin v'tiroshi kachlev. Those who are, these are all things you should pay a lot of attention to, right? You should stay away from. Znut, infidelity, and yayin and tirosh. So he lo ishti, so he didn't drink it. But then he got very thirsty. One day, it's only so long you could hold out for. Eventually, he got really thirsty. When he got thirsty, losagile, he couldn't do anything else. Ishti, so he drank it. And of course, Rava, he got drunk, ugana, and he fell asleep. So now, beautiful, right? This guy's passed out, and what's his name? Yod climbs down from the tree. Nachet, he comes down. Ata shada shushilta stomach. Right, he threw the chain around him, and he sealed it up, and he locked him up. Now, Ashmedai kiatar, when Ashmedai woke up the next morning or whenever, havika mefarso, he was breaking it apart because no chain was going to stop him. Right, he couldn't be stopped by a chain. However, Benayo pointed out to him, Amarle shmad maralach, the name of your master is on this chain, shmad maralach, and if you break it, you're going to destroy Hashem's name, right? Hashem's name is written across it. If you smash it, it's going to ruin the name of Hashem. And so Ashmedai was afraid of Hashem, or Hashem was his master. And so he didn't break the chains. So he's now a captive. This is this magical captivity. And so Benayo started bringing him back to Shlomo. Now, when Benayo took him and brought him, Mita Dikla, when he got next to a palm tree, I guess they walked by a palm tree, Chafbe, he rubbed against it, and Shadia, the whole thing fell down. Matala Beta, he came next to a house, and as he walked by it, Shadia, the whole thing fell down. So clearly he's a very powerful guy, and containing him like this is not actually, the safest thing in the world, right? But the next thing they got up to when they were walking back, Mata Gabi Kuba Dahi Armalata, they came by a shack of a widow. Right now, again, you could just imagine if you're teaching Agadita, which we're not today, the symbolism and the ideas behind the shack of the widow and the tree. Obviously, your mind can go many places, but let's just leave it where it is, right? So he went by the shack of a widow, and Nafka, so she came out of the hut, and she realized again, Benayo is walking this shade Ashmedai with the chain of Hashem's name, and if he walks by my house, it's going to knock down. So Ichanin alei. So she begged him, and she said to him, please, return the page, right, to Samachet Amabet. She begged him and said, please don't please don't go near my hut. So kfa lekomtemine, so he bent his koma, his spine, away from her. Again, I don't know what any of this means. Itkar begarma, and he broke one of his bones. So itbar, sorry, begarma. Amr, and so again, obviously, no, not clear what the heck is going on here. But he broke one of his bones. Amr, he said, "Oh, look, I'm trying to do a nice thing." The gentle tongue. This woman asked me very nicely and gently and begged me not to, harm her house. Tishavar garam. It's going to break your spine, right? So, or sorry, cause, break a bone, basically. So essentially, essentially, she, again, I don't know what's going on here, but he avoided this house. Anyways, back to the story. Third line on Daf Samachet Amud Bet. Chaza Samya on the road. So Benayo is walking home with what's his name, Ashmadai, and he saw a blind person. He was wandering around the road. He couldn't figure out where to go because he was blind. So asking the orche, so he gave him directions, right? He helped him out. So Ashmadai, again, I don't know, he was chained up, but somehow he was able to do this. He basically put him to the right path. Then Chazia Ravya, then he saw a Ravya, which is a drunk person. Tehavi Katoi Borcha, who just looks like a blind person, right? Was stumbling along the road. He didn't know where to go. And Ashmadai helped him too. Asking the Orcha, he helped him on his road. We're going to see later. We're going to ask him, Beneo is going to ask him why he's helping these people. Chaza Chedvata, Kadahavi Kamatchi. Then he saw Chedvata. Chedvata is a wedding, right? A celebration. And he saw that they were celebrating. Bach, and he cried. Okay. Shama lahu gavar davikamlu ushkapa. He saw a man who said to a ushkapa, a shoemaker, Avidle misani l'shavshni. Can you please make me, really durable shoes? I want them to last for 7 years. And Ashmadai laughed. Right? He laughed. And the fifth thing that happened was chazahu kasma davi kasam. They walked by a magic show. Not really a magic show, a magic profession, right? A fortune teller who was telling the fortune, and Ashmadai laughed as well. We're going to see he felt this guy probably didn't really have a good handle on the future. And he laughed as well. Anyway, so that's the 5 cases. We're going to actually go back to them. But Kimat when they get to Shlomo in Yerushalayim, I guess, as king, as castle, they didn't bring him to Shlomo for 3 days, right? They were going to let 3 days pass before they brought him to Shlomo. Yom Kama Amarlo, on the first day, Ashmadai says to them, why aren't you bringing me to the king, right? Why doesn't the king want me to come to him? I'm like, well, Anse Mishtaya, he had a lot to drink last night. He's hungover, right? Literally what it means. Again, is it literal? Is it a mushal for things? Probably, but who the heck knows? Anyways, Anse Mishtaya literally means he's honest. He's overcome by his drink. So what Ashmadai did was shaka levinta oteva chaverta. He took a brick, I guess, in his room, and he placed it on another brick. So after Amrle the Shlomo, they came and told Shlomo about this. Amrle, he said to them, "Oh, Hachi Amrlechu, he's telling you Hadur Ashkuya, give him a little bit more to drink." Right? Sometimes when you're really hungover, but this is a sign of a person who's drunk, but you need a little more of a drink, right? It's an eye opener, it's called in medical terminology, where you have, it actually, I remember from medical school. It's one of the questions you ask people when you're trying to screen for alcoholism. So you ask them if they ever drink because they need an eye opener to get themselves functioning again.
Oh, okay.
Meaning you had a lot yesterday. You wake up in the morning and you're very hungover and your headache. You take a little drink and you get back to your dependency.
Amazing.
Right? Not that it's good advice, but anyways, that's his advice. So the machar. So he didn't come to Shlomo that day. The next day, Amralu, they said to him, Amaylo kabai le malka legabe. Well, why didn't he want me today? I'm like, well, he had a lot to eat yesterday. Anse mechla, he's honest from eating too much. So then what they saw, Ashmadai did, he actually took one brick off of the other brick, and he put it on the ground. Atu Amrle the Shlomo, they came and they told us to Shlomo, and Amrle, he said to them, well, his message to me, his message to you at least, is nagidu minei mechle. You should remove food, meaning the cure for overeating is to take a break from eating. It seems a little obvious, but okay. Right, so you should stay away from food and you'll feel better. Anyways, that was the day number 2, right? After 3 days, l'sof tlata yumi ayalakame. After 3 days, finally Ashmadai shows up, is brought in chains in front of Shlomo, And Ashmedai, interestingly, this is a great story. Shakal Kanya, he took a reed, right, a long piece of a stick. Umashach arba gamidi, he measured out, I guess he broke it and measured out 4 amot. 4 gamidi is the measure of an amma, right? So 7 feet or 6 feet. Shavda the kamen, he threw that on the ground in front of Shlomo HaMelech. Amalei, he said to him, look, this is what Ashmedai said to Shlomo. Michti. When you, Ahugavra, right, referring to him in the third person, but when you, Shlomo, die, right, all you're going to have left in this world, right, is something this big. I mean, you're not going to have anything left. You won't have anything left of all your riches and your castles and your soldiers and your guards. The only thing you're going to have left when you die is Ela Arba Garmiti. You have 4 amot in the ground where you're buried, right? I mean, that's all that's going to be left. Hashta kavishte the kuliyama. Okay, so now you're in a few years, right? When you die, you're going to have nothing. Now you've conquered the entire world. You're the master of everything. Lo savata the kafshik nami ledidi. You really needed to come and mess with my world, right? We've got a good thing going on, Ashedim. And what do you need it for? You've been given so much, Shlomo, right? You're right in this world as a human is 4 amot of dirt, right? And you have temporarily, at least while you're alive, have been given everything. And what do you need to come and wreck my world for and start messing with things outside of your own world? It's a good question, right? So Amalei, so Shlomo said to him, I actually don't need anything from you. Lo kaba'ina minach midi. I don't need anything from you. I want no trouble here. But I need to build the Beit HaMikdash. Bi'ina di'ivnai le Beit HaMikdash v'kami ba'ilei shamir. I need the shamir. And I figure I was told by my sources, I don't think he revealed his sources, that you are the one who can help me get the shamir. So we are now in the last of the narrow lines. Amrle, so Ashmedai said, you know what? I hear your question, but I do not have power over the shamir. L'didio masarli, the first wide line. It wasn't given to me, but l'sara diyama masarli. It was given over to the Sar of the Yam. Again, these are very metaphysical creatures, but the Sar of the Yam literally means, as my daughter would probably call it, Poseidon. But
Poseidon, yeah, I would say the same.
She's a very big fan of Percy Jackson, who was
Which one? Which of your daughters?
Evie. Cecily and Evie. They've read many of them. So I think he was a son of Poseidon. Is that?
That's the god of the sea.
No, I think in the book,
the Greeks.
I think he's the child. Anyways, whatever. So Hashem gave over the shamir to the Sar of the Yam, Masaleh. Again, I don't know who or what that is, but the Sar of the Yam, and in fact, and again, doesn't have a name, and why the shamir would be connected to the Yam is not so clear, but okay. But he gave it to the Sar of the Yam, and the Sar of the Yam, I guess, lo yahiv lei ela tarnagola bra. He only gives it over. It only gives it over to a tarnagol bra. It's not clear what a tarnagol bra means. Bra literally means outside, right? So we usually translate this as a wild tarnagol, but I don't know. It could very well mean something else. In this Steinsaltz, there's a picture of a bird with a big crown, and says that's what it is, the dukifat, which has this very elaborate crown. Anyways, so either way, he gave it to this tarnagol. This tarnagol is trusted completely on his shvua that he will never give away or share the shamir with people who shouldn't have it. So that was what he got from the shade. And he asked, or maybe kept going, my oven bay. So what does this tarnagol bra do with this shamir? You know what he does with it? It's just so fascinating how they imagine the world being developed. It's beautiful, actually, this part of it. He brings it to mountains, he goes out to places where there's no one living there, to like the Wild West. He puts down the shamir on the shina really means the teeth, but the
mountain's peak.
Yeah, the rocks that come out the top. Upakatura, and it basically exposes and cracks open the mountain, right? And therefore makes it livable, right? Obviously, if you had one solid rock, you can't plant, but if you have a lot of small rocks, you can start working with it. Umankit mighty Barzani meilani, this bird, it's great. This bird will then go and bring seeds from trees. V'shadi hatam, and he plants them there. It's like Johnny Appleseed, right? Plants these trees. the Havi Yishuv, and eventually, 5 million years later or something, it'll become habitable, right? Sorry, it'll be something that you can habitate, right? So it's an amazing work of this bird that you think of this bird. I mean, it sounds very Native American as well, right? They had a lot of birds in their their
Right.
realm, but you basically, the bird is cracking through the mountains, planting small seeds that become big trees that crack it further, that develop an ecosystem, et cetera, et cetera. And you could just see, I mean, I think it probably does exist this way in terms of over a very long period of time, stone breaking down. So this just accelerated it, right? This was their way of doing it. So that's what the bird is busy doing. Of course, Shlomo was like, well, he's got to take a pause because I need the Shamir to build the Beit HaMikdash, right? But that's what the Targum Bra does. And that's why, now I understand it. That's the Targum of the word duchifat, right, is Nagar Tura, the one who cuts through mountains, right? Because this bird, amazingly, through the help of the Shamir, and not just the Shamir, but also planting the trees, is able to break through the mountains. Okay, so now Shlomo's got this great piece of intelligence. You got to find the Tarnagol Bra. So Badku Kina, the Tarnagol Bra, right? So they went and they found a cane, a nest of a Tarnagol Bra. Now again, it's really unclear if it's one Tarnagol Bra or if it's every Tarnagol Bra, like how many of these are there? But they figured it out. They found the nest of this Tarnagol Bra. The Itle B'nei, there were children, there were chicks, there were babies inside of it. And chafyu likine zugita chivarta. They covered it up with zug, which is again fascinating, with glass that was chivarta, that was clear, that was white. It wasn't white, but see-through. So they had, I don't know where they got that from, to be honest, but they found some glass that was clear, and they covered the nest with the glass. So this was maddening for the bird, right? Because the bird came back and saw its children there and couldn't get to them. Right. So nothing draws, as we all know, right? A mother bird, but like chicks in the nest, and she was totally helpless from getting there. So boy, Lemeo of Lomatzi, she tried to get in and she couldn't get through. So she came up, okay, it's time to pull out my secret weapon. What's my secret weapon? The Shamir, because the Shamir can eat through anything. So it can eat through the glass, right? So Azo Aiti Shamira, she went and brought the Shamir, Vot Ve'alevei, and she put it on the glass so that it would eat through the glass so she can get to her children. And then at that moment, Rama Bekala, they threw some dirt at it. Shadye, she jumped away or knocked her over, and Shakli, and they just took the Shamir and ran away. So unfortunately, this poor bird was devastated. Azal Chanak Nafshe Ashwate. She went and hung herself, strangled herself, because she went against her shvua. But she was meant to be watching this Shamir, and this sounds like a very cruel incident, right? They used her children to their advantage, and they basically stole her, and she committed suicide. Again, the concept of this bird committing suicide.
Oh, yeah.
So that's the middle of this. So they got the Shamir, okay? So now we'll they're going to use the Shamir to build the Beit HaMikdash, but let's tie up some loose ends before we get there. So first of all, Amalei Benayo got an audience with Ashmedai, and he said to him, can you explain to me all this funny stuff you were doing on our trip home, right? My time, why is it that ki chaziti lahu samya tavi katoi beorcha asikte laorche? Why did you help the blind guy? You saw the blind guy, struggling. You put him on the right path. Why? Well, what's your business? Who do you care? Amalei said, no, because I have a lot of inside intelligence. And Machriz Ale Berakia, I know that they have announced, meaning they've established in the heavens that he's a really good dude, right? He's a great guy. It's Tzaddik Gomerhu. He's a really righteous person. Uman da'avle nicha nafshi, and someone who does a favor for him, Zachi la'amadati, will merit the world to come. Now, again, I'm not sure if Ashmedai is aiming for the world to come.
I was going to say, what does he care about that? But okay.
I'm not sure what Shaden do exactly in the world to come. But anyways, he was like, this was a guy I really wanted to help because he was a really secret righteous person. Well, my time continues, Ravya, you saw the drunk guy, who was stumbling along, you helped him out too. He said, well, he's the opposite. They announced that this guy is the worst, right? He's a purely worthless person. But I like to mess things up. I wanted to do him a favor, so that he can be used up, right? Use up all his reward in this world. Meaning, I'm punishing him basically by giving him extra benefit in this world, so he gets less in the world to come because he's a bad person. Okay. My time, why did you cry when you saw the wedding that was going on? Amalei said, look, I have this foresight. Everyone's standing around celebrating, thrilled at the wedding. I know that this guy's going to die tomorrow. And he's got a younger brother who's like 2 years old, and his wife, his widow, is not going to be able to get married until that kid becomes mature. So like she married into this guy, which unfortunately was, a real challenge in life, especially back then when, it's different. But, it's true today too, to be honest. But she, I know, boy, Maimed Gavra, but go to human. I know this guy's going to die in 3 days, right? And Baina Baya Minter Liyavim Katan Tleiser Shnin. His wife is going to be waiting for his Yavam, whose brother is of Katan, for 13 years. I guess he was just born, right? So basically, I know that this is going to be the worst tragedy in the world in a few days. My time, why is it that when you heard the guy say to the shoemaker, make me shoes that will last for 7 years, you laughed? Because I knew, of course, right? This guy's not going to live 7 years, right? Who Shiva Yume Letle, he doesn't even have 7 days. Misani the Shav Shdin Bai, he needs shoes that last 7 years, right? Meaning people, this guy sat, I laughed because you make the assumption, like, let me get the extended warranty kind of thing. And it's I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, but
I like that.
well, if you happen to be a shading, you can laugh. But but I think the point is this: people make the assumption that they're going to be around forever, and to this guy, it's like such a joke, right? Obviously, you have no idea. Finally, I know where the place is. I know where the place is, but in mine, there's an aruch comment on the right, and we're one line above that. I don't know if yours is the same. My time ki chazitelu kasma davikasim achiket. Well, you saw this, this sorcerer, this guy predicting the future. Right, he's standing there. He's saying, "I predict who's going to win the election." Why did you laugh? I'm like, because look, this guy, the Haviyativ Abegaza Demalka, right? This guy is sitting on the treasure of the king. Right below him, if he dug down, he would find, the lost ark. Right, there's billions of dollars in treasure sitting right under his house. Right, and he's a magician telling you the future. He has no idea what's going on underneath his own tuchus. Right, like so, my today. He doesn't even know what's sitting on below him. So again, obviously, very, very interesting mashal for people who are seeing the future but don't know what they're looking at. Anyways, continues the story. Tarchev Gabe Adibani the Beit HaMikdash. So Shlomo kept Ashmedai with him until he finished building the Beit HaMikdash. I'm not sure why exactly, because Ashmedai, wasn't helping. I don't really know. Now, obviously, Shlomo utilized him in some fashion, otherwise he wouldn't have kept him. But anyways, he kept him as a prisoner, tied up in this, golden rope that had Hashem's name on it until he was finished building the Beit HaMikdash. I guess he somehow utilized him. Anyways, one day they were together, right? Him and Ashmedai. And he said to Ashmedai, look, if it says in the Torah, again, why he's explaining to Ashmedai, asking Ashmedai to explain the Torah, it says, right? That it was like the re'im is an ox. But toafot means like the flying horns almost, right? Amina, so what does that mean? Like, what's the flying horns of the ox? So Amina Ashmedai explained, or maybe Shlomo is still talking. Amina, they say, meaning we understand this pasuk, toafot means the malachi hasharet. The toafot are the flying things, those are the malachi hasharet. Re'im refers to the shedim. Re'im, which I said translated as an animal, refers to the shedim. So ask Shlomo to Ashmedai, my Rabutayo Minan. What is so great about you? Why does the pasuk call you this great thing? Like, what can Shadim do that's so unique? Interesting, right? I don't exactly know what he's asking. So Amarle, so Ashmedai says to Shlomo very cleverly, Shkol Shushilta Minai. I'd be happy to give you a demonstration. Take the chain off of me, the Havli Izaktach, and give me your ring. Remember, the ring was to protect Shlomo or protect Benayo in the beginning, but now to protect Shlomo. And then I could show you how great I am. So I don't know why Shlomo fell for it, but Shlomo did. So Shlomo took off his chains. The Yavle Izakte, and he gave him his magic ring. And of course, Ashmedai, Bal'e, he swallowed him whole. Right?
Oh.
The other shot, there's many shots. One is that he swallowed the ring. But it could be swallowed Shlomo. Anyways, he grew, Ashmedai grew until he had one wing, one gape, right, as a wing in the sky, in the heavens, the chad gape ba'ara, and one in the ground. And Patke, then he threw Shlomo, either he threw him up or he actually physically threw him, Arba Mea Parsi, he threw him 400 parsaot, till he landed in, I don't know, in Africa, okay? Now about that episode in Shlomo's life, Amar Shlomo, what benefit does a person have for everything he's done if he can just be displaced by a shade, like that? Shlomo says in Kohelet, this was my portion from all my work. My vizeh, what do you mean this? We understand it referring to something he's holding in his hand, presumably. So Rav Shmuel had a debate about this. Chad Amar, it's referring to maklo, that all he was left with was his staff, meaning he was a wanderer, he was an itinerant traveler. The Chad Amar gundo, and one says it refers to his gundo, which is his his jacket, right? I guess that whatever he was wearing at the time.
His cloak.
His cloak, which might have been royal, right? Because I guess he had something special. Anyways, Shlomo's now been deposed, and Ashmedai is sitting on his throne, claiming he's Shlomo, he's the king, right? So Shlomo is now begging door to door. He's totally, has nothing. Destitute, thank you. Wherever he showed up, Amar, he would say the famous words of Shlomo, Ani Kohelet, Ayiti Melech al Yisrael Yerushalayim. I am Kohelet, I was the king. Now, obviously, it's the past tense, right? So that's what it's referring to, because I'm not anymore, or I'm not temporarily. Anyways, he kept wandering, and news came spread that there's this madman walking around saying he's Shlomo, even though Shlomo didn't, is presumably still in his castle. Kimatagave Sanhedrin, right? When he got to the Sanhedrin, he finally got to someone of authority. Murabanan, the rabbi said, okay, let's investigate. And this man stood in front of him and said, I'm Shlomo, and I'll prove it to you. And I gave you all the details. And the Rabbanan said, look, Michti, Shotah b'chada milta losarch, right? If you're really a shotah, you really lost your connection to reality, you're not going to just do one thing, right? Meaning he seems like a perfectly normal person, except for one delusion, which is that he's Shlomo. That's uncommon. Usually people who have these delusions have many other delusions, right? I think it's very rare to see someone who has one fact that's way off, but every other fact in the world they agree with, right? If you're a conspiracy theorist, you hold of many conspiracies. It's never just one, that's for sure. So that's what they said, my guy. So let's try to figure out what's going on. This is a very unusual case of an insane person. So Amrei the B'nayo, so then they called the king, right? They went to the B'nayo, who seemed to be the gatekeeper, and they said, Kaboyle Malka Gabe, has the king been hanging out with you lately? I'm like, lo, come to think of it, I haven't seen him in a few weeks. So then they sent a message to the harem, right, to the queens, which is another place where the king might be, right? And they said, Ka'ati Malka the Gabaycho, has the king been around your Shlomo, unfortunately, or for whatever, was famous for having many, many, many queens, right? Many women. So has the king been there? Yeah, he comes all the time, Ka'ati. They said back, well, Badku Bikare, have you ever checked his feet? Right? Because remember, I don't know if you know this, we've talked about this before, that Shadim have some weaknesses, but one of them is that their feet are not human feet. Remember, we've said before, they have bird's feet or something. Again, I don't know how that fits into the whole earlier bird and the whole story. It seems very interesting, but they have unusual feet. And they said, oh yeah, it's very interesting. Now that you mentioned, he never takes his socks off. So Bimuki Ka'ati comes in his muki, is his socks, right? He never takes them off. And interestingly, he's not really behaving like Shlomo, because Katavle b'nidutayo, he's asking to sleep with the women when they're nida, and Katavle nami the Batsheva ime, he's asking to sleep with his mother Batsheva, right? Which again, very bizarre, obviously. Anyways, they realized, wait, this guy, there must be an imposter. There must be a shade, which is what Shlomo must have told them, right? I was taken over by a shade and I was thrown away, and the person on my throne is Ashmedai. So they started trusting Shlomo. So they said, listen, Atya Shlomo, they brought Shlomo, Havile Izakta, they gave him a chain, right? And Shushilta, and a ring. Sorry, Izakta is the ring and the chain. This very powerful chain. And so when Shlomo came in with these tools, Chazia Parach, he saw that Ashmedai saw him and ran away. So Shlomo was able to get rid of Ashmedai. But Afilu Hachi, even though Shlomo was able to get rid of Ashmedai, he was terrified for the rest of his life. He was fearful of Ashmedai. Now you understand the pasuk in Shir Hashirim, where it says, "Hinemi tato shel Shlomo." If you think about Shlomo's bed, Shishim giborim saviv lav mi'koberei Yisrael. They had to have 60 warriors surrounding him. Kulam achuzei cherev v'lumdei milchama ish charbal yerechel mipachad balilot. Shlomo had this terror of the night because of Ashmedai, and he had to have 60 people around him. Now, Rav and Shmuel had a debate about Shlomo's ultimate fate. Chad Amar Melech v'Hedyot. One said he was a king, and then he became a commoner, a Hedyot. Meaning, even though the story we just told, he became a king again. I mean, I think the Maral, so others understand that this means he never regained sort of the self-confidence and the belief in himself as a king. He knew that he was basically susceptible to being attacked by a shade at any time. And Chad Amar once said, no, in fact, Melech v'Hedyot v'Melech, he actually came back and he was a king. He would then been deposed essentially or thrown away, but he came back and he was king again. As before. So that's the end of Ashmedai's story. Do you want to continue a little bit more? Should we stop here? Let me do a little more because I feel bad leaving it for tomorrow.
Yeah. Why do you feel bad?
Tomorrow's daf is impossibly difficult. It's all about these medical things that make no sense in our terms. Like if you have a headache, you should take these 7 things and mix them together and pour them on your brain.
Excellent. Let's go and continue a little bit more.
Yeah, let me try to get to the end of the daf so we can minimize some of that for tomorrow. Continues the Gemara again, and this discussion you'll see has a lot to do with shadim and miracles, magic, and all that. L'dama dereisha. Let's say a person has blood on their head, which probably means a headache or vision problems. So leite shorbina, I'm using some English here. He should bring a shorbina, which it says in my thing is a cypress tree. Ubina, which is a
willow.
Asa, which is a hadas, which I thought was a willow.
Myrtle.
Dra, which is olive. Zeta, zeta is olive. Asa dra, sorry. Asa dra means a fresh, an outdoor asa. A zeta, olives. Chilfa, which is poplar, it says here. I guess we have the same English. Chilfe diyama, and then a sea willow, it says. I don't know what that's different than other willow. The yavla. And I don't know what yavla is.
It's not translated. And it's Rashi says it's an herb.
Okay. And so take all these things, and put them all together, boil them together, and so you have to have the warts and everything. Anyways, you stir it. You take 300 cups and you pour it on one side of your head, and pour 300 on the other side.
Isn't it what we do nowadays?
What?
I said, isn't it what we do nowadays?
Yeah, exactly. Now, if that doesn't work, shockingly, then you should bring a white rose, all of its what's it called? Leaves are on one side in one row. Magic rose. Vilishkele, you should take it off, right? And boil it, right? Oh, sorry, lishkele means you should boil it, shalak it. Vilinto shitin kisei hagisa dereisha, you take 60 cups of this water on one side, shitin kisei hagisa dereisha on the other side.
Perfect.
Litzilchata, if you have a tzilchata, which in mine says is a migraine.
Yeah, same here.
Rashi says, interestingly, and we'll see why it's very interesting, that's a headache and half the head, meaning it's a focused headache. So I guess that's why we say migraine, but not a full head headache. Then
I never made the connection.
Yeah, that's the connection.
Oh, wow.
Then Leiti Tarnagol Bra, you bring a wild Tarnagol, Velishchate Bezuzah Chivra, and you shecht it using a white zuz, I guess a sharpened coin. Ahu Gisa de Kaivle, you shecht it on the side of the neck of the Tarnagol where you have your headache. So you cut the right side of the neck if you have a headache on the right side. When don't let the blood go into the eyes of the Tarnagol, because I guess that would be bad luck, right? And litle b'seifa bebava, you hang it up on the doorpost. And when you walk through the door, you bump into it. When you exit, you bump into it, and that somehow will make your headache better, probably because you'll be thinking more about this crazy Tarnagol. So I think we'll stop there and we'll continue. This is a whole nother daf of this, so it's challenging, but it is part of Shas, and we're going to do it tomorrow. At least,
interesting what they did back then.
At least Tov will do it tomorrow. Okay, well, thanks for joining, Miriam. Shavuot Tov. We're going to Shabbat. I'll get back to you. Thank you for the invitation. It's very kind.
Okay.
I'm trying to convince Cecily to come home, but she's not there yet, but I'm trying to get her. So I'll let you know. as
Okay,
soon-
so if you do,
I'll-
then Friday night is yours.
Thank you. If she does, it's 5 of us altogether.
No problem.
Just so you know.
I'm
Okay.
having a lot more than that on Shabbat lunch, so that's okay. Don't worry. I'm
Thank you.
used to it.
Thank you, Miriam. Shavua tov.
Okay, Shavua tov.